When I was in middle school and high school, my after-school weekend and summer job was working as an assistant to a scenic designer, which meant as a teenager I found myself exploring some of New York City's biggest, most iconic theaters. Among other things, the woman I worked for is the associate or American designer for Phantom of the Opera, which meant that one of the places I got to have my adventures was at the Majestic Theater, working on Phantom's iconic set. Now, if you're not one of the 20 million people who have seen Phantom of the Opera on Broadway, you might not know this, but the Phantom of the Opera has a chandelier as one of its key scenic elements, and it's famous, and even if you haven't seen the show, you're probably aware of the chandelier. And among other things, the chandelier specifically in the New York Broadway production is famously, or maybe infamously, slow. And it takes a long time to get where it's going. It does have to move in the show. I don't want to spoil anything if you never saw it, but it's a complicated piece of scenery. At one point, there was a plan to get it moving a little bit more smoothly. And as part of that, they pulled one of the chandeliers that had been touring, and they were gonna kind of jazz it up, make it ready for Broadway. And there was a plan to swap out the show chandelier with this understudy chandelier from the tour. And that would give them an opportunity to rework the machine of it and get it more exciting, get it moving a little bit faster. So they did that. They had the understudy chandelier in the shop. Everything was getting ready to make this plan go into effect, to jazz up our Broadway chandelier. And unfortunately, plans to do so were halted by the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001. And that was an event that affected all of New York in many ways. And it affected Broadway in many ways, including that New York saw a huge decrease in tourism for a long time, and Broadway primarily is run off of tourism. And a lot of shows closed. Phantom was able to stay open. They reinvested in the show. They said, yes, let's keep this wonderful thing running. But they definitely weren't going to spend the money to swap out chandeliers at that time. So that project was put on hold. A few years later, the idea, things were going more smoothly. The city was coming back to life. People were coming into town again. And they started to revisit this plan of, well, what can we do for this poor, tired chandelier? And kind of in the interim, it had been decided that maybe the chandelier shouldn't leave the building. There were people in the production who felt that maybe that would be a bad idea. Maybe the chandelier might be cursed. So it was decided we're not going to take the chandelier out of the building and refurbish it, but we can work on it in the building. So a work call was scheduled. And again, we're not taking it out of the building. It's going to stay in the Majestic, but we'll see what we can do with it in place as is. So that was scheduled, and the day we were supposed to go in and work on it was the musician strike of 2003. And among other things, on Broadway, the unions are very supportive of each other. One union would never cross another union's picket line, so that call was canceled. No one's entering the building, nothing's happening. Okay, we'll try again another time. Right. So August of that year. This is attempt number 3. We are in the building. We are, in fact, working on the chandelier. It has been flown down. It is on the stage. There are paint cloths under it. There are people starting to work on it. And there we are, finally. Okay, phew, here it goes. And these work calls, we only have a few hours, and it's not just the chandelier that's being worked on. Everything in the show is constantly being upkept. There's always, my boss would go in and watch the show, see, what needs some work, what's starting to look a little shabby, to maintain that same look, to always have the show looking like it looked on opening night. So we're working away. We've got different pieces of scenery in, different people are working on different things. We've got the dressing room, we've got the dust cloths that cover everything at the open of the show. All these different pieces are being worked on. And all of a sudden the lights go out. Okay, no big deal. We figured we blew a fuse, which has happened to us on work calls before, not specifically at the Majestic, but you're trying to get the paint to dry fast, you plug in one too many fans, you blow a fuse, the power goes out. Now, a couple things. First of all, this is you can use your cell phone as a flashlight, but also these are people who work in theater, so everyone had a flashlight on them. Right away, there was light. Also, there are laws for safety reasons that theaters have to have a backup generator. So seconds after the lights went out, the emergency exits were illuminated. So we're not in total blackness. We're not going to fall off the stage. But also, the chandelier, a little inside information here, because of what it has to do in the show, because it has to move, is battery operated. And generally, at the end of the show, they fly it in, they plug it in with an extension cord. It's very unfancy. But it's run off of batteries. So the theater is dark, but there's that chandelier sitting at the front of the stage, glowing. And we go, oh no, we blew a fuse. Okay. And someone manages to go out into the back alley. Phantom of the Opera shares a stage door with the other theaters that it's adjacent to. And one of the stagehands goes out into the alley and comes back in and goes, oh no, guys, all of the theaters are out. And we're like, oh, we're in so much trouble. And then shortly after that, someone makes it to 8th Avenue. All of 8th Avenue is out. Because this was the blackout of August 2003. Everything was out. By the way, we're still pretty sure that blackout might have been our fault, even though they threw the blame all the way to Akron, Ohio. But there we are. All of New York City, all of the northeastern United States is without power. And there's our little chandelier, our big chandelier, glowing and blinking at us with its battery. And if you were in New York that time, it was a hot August day. It was about 98 degrees out. We didn't know what had happened at first. Again, this is very close to the time after the terrorist attacks of 9/11. So we found battery-powered radios and we turned them on. We were worried that something might have happened. Nope, just a blackout, just a rolling blackout. And the other thing about post-9/11 New York is that nothing fazed us at that point. We were going to take care of each other. We were going to get things done. This was no big deal. It was just a power outage. So it was actually a pretty relaxed environment in New York City for an August day with 98-degree heat with no power. But the theaters, they keep really cool during the day in the summer. There's no windows, there's no light coming in, but they know that when the show starts and all those bodies fill it and all the lights turn on, it gets pretty warm. So during the day, they keep the space cool so that it's ready for the show. So we were fine, we were sitting cool. We were able to find a pizza place that had a non-electric oven that they were still making pizza, as long as you could pay in cash, because nobody could use their credit card, nobody could use their cell phone. We cleaned up because we didn't know if there was going to be a show that night, so we're packing up all the paint and all of the supplies in the dark with our flashlights. We're standing at the stage door, watching other shows get canceled for the night. Phantom of the Opera was one of the last shows to cancel, so we're watching other people leave their theaters. Hey, I'm going home, good night. We started joking around about, if the cast can't get in, who's going to fill in for which role of the stagehands and the designers and the painters who were there that day. And eventually Phantom did get canceled. And most of the painters who were with us, the scenic painters who were with us, had their cars in a garage that you could drive in and out of. So they got in their cars, they went home. Our car was in an elevator garage, so we weren't going anywhere. And the trains weren't running, and there was really no way to get home, and there was almost no way to make a cell phone call to let my mom know what was happening or where I was, because again, I was a teenager at the time. But we decided that we needed to find a place to stay. And my boss had a relative on the Upper East Side. I had a relative on the Upper East Side. We decided, okay, let's walk up to the Upper East Side. Whoever answers the door first, that's where we'll spend the night. So we took this wild ride or walk through the city, you know, like trying to figure out how to safely cross every intersection. The guardian angels were out in busy sections helping get traffic through the city safely. Bars were giving away beer because they knew it was going to go bad. Ice cream shops were giving away ice cream. They just knew every business owners knew that they're going to file an insurance claim anyway. Might as well make everyone happy. People were walking home over the bridges. And we got to Central Park and there were still hansom carriages out. And we said, you know what? If not today, when? And we took a ride in a hansom carriage. And people who had been in New York for prior blackouts were a little bit nervous. Was there going to be looting? Was there going to be anything, troublesome after dark? So the hansom carriage said, I'll take you as far as I can take you, but then I'm going home for the night. We don't know what's going to happen. But again, this was post 9/11 New York. Nothing happened. It was community. It was an entire city taking care of each other, keeping a cool, level head. And we were able to get to my boss's relative's house and knocked on the door, and her cousin looked out the window with a flashlight like the gatekeeper at the Emerald City, who's there? And gave us a nice place to stay. We walked back to the park, to the reservoir, and did fake Morse code with our flashlights across the reservoir with someone on the other side. There was a little enough light pollution that night that you could see the stars over New York City. And it was peaceful. And when the sun went down, it got cool. And the next morning, things were starting to come back online. We were finally able to get our car. We were finally able to go home. But the chandelier still wasn't done. And the chandelier didn't get finished until the day that Phantom of the Opera became the longest running show in Broadway history. And because it was going to be a big deal and a big party, and the music box company was coming over from London to celebrate with us, and all of these things, we got to do a massive work call and make everything look as shiny or dull or whatever as it was the day the show first opened. And on that big list of everything we wanted, it was that big wish list of what do we want for that big event, was the chandelier. And it has these lyres on it, these instruments, and it got new lyres put on, but they were a little too bright. They needed to be dulled down to match the rest of the chandelier. And that was the last scenic note that we worked on the day that Phantom of the Opera became the longest running show in Broadway history. And I was able to take a picture of my boss doing that last note, finally getting to give that chandelier the love it needed. And that night, with everyone in their finest suits and gowns and their masks, it was a masquerade ball, the chandelier rose up over the orchestra and over the audience to its place at the top of the majestic theater, to thunderous applause. And that's the story of the chandelier of the Phantom of the Opera.